Welcome back to Magnolia Media Podcast. Today I will be your host, Courtney Brown, and our traditional host, Jonathan Ruggiero, is going to be our guest host. Say hello, Jonathan.
Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be on this side of the board for a change.
Now, today we're just going to look at a kind of general state of events, and we did have some breaking news this morning. We got our Evan Gershkovich. I struggle with his last name. Reporter. We got our Wall Street reporter back home from Russia with a prisoner exchange. What's the importance of that, aside from just bringing our people home, which, is number one?
Forgive me possibly for being a little, I don't know, maybe getting the cart ahead of the horse a little bit. But with polls like the ones that came out Monday after the weekend that showed Kamala ahead in 5 of 7 swing states and in Michigan by 11. And the Susquehanna poll in Pennsylvania, she was ahead by 2 in the New York Times. I think it was the New York Times Siena poll, if I'm not mistaken. She was down 4 in Pennsylvania. It's a very difficult state to poll because the population centers are so different than the rural counties, sort of the 70-30 Trump counties out in Podunk. And I hate to be dismissive, but I've lived in Pennsylvania and I've lived in those towns, and it's very much Podunk. So they're not worldly people, making these decisions. So I would say it's probably somewhere between a 2 and 5 point lead for Harris in Pennsylvania. She's leading everywhere else. So according to new polling. And I think Putin sort of saw the writing on the wall and figured the best deal I'm going to get is with a man I've known for 26 years, that Putin has been president, dictator of Russia since I think 2000, actually. And Joe Biden has been a major political figure in the United States, either in the Senate, Vice President, or White House. So he knew him and was probably felt more comfortable dealing with him than a possible Harris administration, which is going to do everything in its power to, continue to pour resources into Ukraine. It's a very complicated global scenario, but I think it speaks volumes about the Trump campaign that Putin would make this exchange.
Someone backing Trump hard is
we know
not...
Putin loves Trump. We know Putin wants Trump to win. He's pouring money and resources, and the misinformation that will come out of Russia in the next few, weeks will be mind-boggling. The deep fake videos and bot accounts on what was once Twitter and is now Elon Musk's personal cesspool. I think it's indicative. I think it says a lot about the state of the presidential race that Putin did this now. And it's sort of a smack in the face to Donald Trump, because Trump has no real response. Evan Gershkovich is home. That was the knock on him. And you can scream border all day, but, that lead, by the way, is disappearing as people become aware that Trump is the reason the most conservative immigration bill in the last 75 years didn't pass, because this conservative bill written by conservative Senator James Lankford that had been agreed to by a certain group of Democrats, Republicans, and President Biden that would have passed was...
We're going to circle back to that. That's another one. So focusing on the retrieving of our people, it's really comes down to that even Putin doesn't have faith in Trump winning the election anymore,
which
is good for us. And kind of circling back to your border comments, now that once the newness kind of having Kamala Harris as our essentially Democratic candidate, we all know that's what's going to happen. What do you think is going to be kind of the number one issue for the presidential election?
Weirdness. The weirdness. I would say the word of the week, perhaps the word of the last 2 weeks, has been weird. I mean, these people are effing weird. J.D. Vance is weird. You don't, at college age, say I'm gay, and then decide, and of course I'm speaking in first person for J.D. here, a man who's changed his name 3 times. We don't even know. I'm not sure what his real name is. We all know it's not J.D. Vance. That's not the Vance. That's not the name his mother gave him. Was supposedly gay, then went away on a retreat, which, warning signs, he went away on a retreat with a priest and then came back a holy rolling, right-wing Catholic. We all know Trump is weird as all hell. And then when you add to it the dolphin incident, the couch, J.D. Vance and the couch, and J.D. Vance looking up women and dolphins, and that's all I'll say about that. So,
for the sake of our family listeners,
to encapsulate the entire week, I would say weird. But I do think it's going to come down to excitement. The Biden-Harris economic record, and the fact that Biden's right. He should have gotten, and should still be getting, more gratitude, more thanks, more good press for the economy that's the envy of the world. I mean, we have bounced back from the pandemic better than any of our G7 allies, than any major economy in the world. Inflation's below 3%. It looks like the Fed is about to start hiking interest rates again, which is huge for Wall Street. Reducing interest rates so that, money can be borrowed at a lower rate, which will also stimulate the housing market for realtors and home buyers out there. So there's so much great economic data. Unfortunately, it hadn't trickled down to the grocery store yet, where people really feel it. And of course, housing costs are out of control. When the average price of a home in Tennessee exceeds $500,000, we're in trouble.
But we've talked about this before. That stuff like that doesn't come back on Biden. I mean, that really comes back to price gouging with big companies.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, you can prove, yes, inflation's down, but people don't understand that it's not just like companies want to make a profit, and they're price gouging you to continue to make their profits, especially if they're not going to get their tax cuts that Trump wants to give them.
And another big thing is the Trump tax cut, which is currently adding $2.7 trillion to the deficit every year, will expire in the spring of 2025. So it will not be renewed, obviously, under a Harris administration, which will be looking to hit corporations with a minimum tax of probably 25%. I could see us even going to a flat tax, which was once something liberals were vehemently disagreed with. But it does seem like the most logical thing to do. You know what? No bias anywhere. Nobody gets treated any differently. Elon Musk, you pay 25, and Joe Blow, who works a 9 to 5, he pays 25 or she pays 25. And so I think we're probably headed for something like that if we can get the votes in the Senate, which Montana is going to be very difficult, which means we'll have to pick up a vote somewhere. Texas, possible. Florida, possible, maybe. I think we'll have a surprise. I think we're going to get hit with a surprise. And I don't mean in a negative way. I think that a Senate seat somewhere will flip. It could be Tennessee. Who knows? Gloria Johnson is spending real money. The DNC is spending real money. I'm seeing Gloria Johnson ads here in Tennessee.
She had a great ad on YouTube the other night we watched.
Marsha Blackburn is an embarrassment to the state. physically, her lack of decorum. I mean, she might as well show up in a sleeveless Hulk Hogan t-shirt, since now Hulk Hogan is, their secondary messiah behind Donald Trump. Anyway.
While we're about decorum, I don't remember the African-American gentleman that I mentioned was wearing a hat at the convention the other night, but I don't ever see Democrats not dressed appropriately for these events. Like, we've got Marjorie Taylor Greene was showing up in a bunch of MAGA gear and hat. Yeah. We've got other Republicans in baseball caps. It's kind of appalling. Like, I feel like it's kind of disrespectful.
I also find it ironic that, especially on the state level, like in Tennessee, the two Justins, Pearson and Jones, were dismissed from their seats in the state legislature only for 24 hours. They were reinstated by their home city or county council 24 hours later. That they were dismissed for lack of decorum. Wait a second. You've got Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene calling each other bitches on the House floor. This is the most important chamber of the two, is the House. There are 435 members. Those are the direct representatives of the districts. They're our most direct voice to the political process. They're the ones who connect us to the DC power structure, being we the people. And they have denigrated that almost holy place in ways which it's going to be hard to recover. We will recover. Make no mistake. I believe we will, but it's going to take some time.
Now, we've already been talking about the kind of current state of events a little bit, so we're going to backpedal just a little bit. I know in our previous episodes, we've discussed it, you've discussed it, that originally we felt that Biden stepping down was not the right direction. But it almost seems like, is Kamala Harris taking over going to win us this election?
It looks that way. I went from tribal. What I mean by tribal is I'm in the Biden tribe, so a bad comment, about Biden or his age, or Peter Baker, the little worm from the New York Times, I still, by the way, Peter, I still feel like you are the wormiest little nerd on television, and MSNBC would do themselves a service by just letting you work at the New York Times and write your hit pieces on democracy. Not just Democrats, but democracy. So I wanted to sort of defend a man I felt like had done such an extraordinary job. And by every metric, he has done an extraordinary job as president. And if he were 71 instead of 81, yes, he deserves a second term. But he promised to be a bridge president. And the powers that be, the big money donors, were putting their money in down ballot races to try to build some wall of defense against Trump by flipping the House if he were to be elected, because it looked that way. Biden was down 6-9 nationally. He was down in all 7 swing states. There's no path to victory. And I thought Kamala Harris was weak. She hadn't polled above 38% favorability since this thing started. But the moment he passed the baton, and at that point I had gone from being pro-Biden to agnostic to pro-Biden to agnostic, and then finally, okay, if we're going to do it, let's figure out how to get Gavin Newsom in there. And then it was apparent that couldn't happen. And Kamala, I don't know. And then suddenly it hit me. The demographics, Democrats, our coalition has always been young people, college students, mixed race, people of multiracial background, black voters, minority voters of all sorts, women. Kamala Harris checks all those boxes. She's younger, check. A woman, check. It's way past time for America to have had a female president. I mean, Thatcher was in office. She was Prime Minister of Great Britain, basically our sister nation, or brother nation, however you want to look at it, in 79. And we're here still saying, well, she's too shrill, or I don't like her pantsuit, and of course referring to Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton cracked the glass ceiling, and it appears Kamala Harris is poised to just blow it completely up. It does, because she's not only a woman, she's half black by way of Jamaica.
Her stepchildren are Jewish. I mean, she's multiracial.
And she's Indian American.
I mean, she's got a lot going for her.
I mean, you know, and then Trump showing up to the National Association of Black Journalists last night and basically picking a fight right away by saying he didn't know Kamala Harris was black, that he only knew her identifying as an Asian American woman, despite the fact Kamala Harris bypassed Ivy League universities to go to an HBCU, a historically black college university. She's in an all-black sorority, of which she's still a member. I don't know of a person who's been more openly black in their political career than Kamala Harris.
I'm still confused. Why does that matter for Trump?
Well, Trump was meeting with the National Association of Black Journalists early on. The first question he was asked had something to do with why should black voters trust you after the things you've said.
Fair question.
Degrading. Immediately he gets defensive and hostile and starts attacking Kamala Harris's race. And we have to keep this in mind. I mean, Trump surrogate and the Viktor Orban disciple of Hungary, the Banshee of Budapest. I'm trying to remember his name right offhand. He does a podcast in Europe. I can't think of his name right off the top of my head. It's driving me crazy. He went so far as to call her the C word, as it refers to race. And so it's just a matter of time before somebody in that same
path kind of lets it slip.
That wears that same hat. It's a Steve Bannon type that podcasts, or Tucker Carlson, or somebody.
Hell, I wouldn't be
like
surprised
that.
if something slipped out of Trump's mouth.
The N-word's coming. I mean, again, we have the man who's in love with Viktor Orban, the extreme right-winger, who was sort of in Trump's orbit during the only Trump term, 2016-2020.
The dark times of America.
I can't remember his name for the life. Sebastian Gorka. Sebastian Gorka, on his talk show, a radio show, podcast, it's not a radio show, was it a couple of days after she became the presumptive nominee after Biden retired, called her, and again, this isn't me speaking here, folks, so don't hold it against me, colored on his podcast. This is like 1930s language, Sebastian Gorka.
That's almost the equivalent of calling. You might as well call it the N-word.
He might as well use the N-word. He wanted to use it, I think that we need to book him some guests like Mike Tyson and some other people of color. We're not going to twist it and try to turn it into something racist. These are people of color. Denzel Washington. Let's have Denzel Washington in the same room with Sebastian Gorka and see if he uses the same terminology he uses about political figures. Or Delroy Lindo. Or, these are intimidating
I still think the Mike Tyson one would be pretty funny. Even MJ.
Well, MJ wouldn't do it, but I think about Delroy Lindo from, I think you'd probably know him best from Da 5 Bloods. And he's such an intimidating man. And it's, again, not because he's muscled up. He's probably in his 70s by now.
He just has a commanding presence.
But he commands attention and respect. Lloyd Austin, the current Director of Defense for the United States, former 3-star general in the United States Army. Let's get in a room, Sebastian, however old Sebastian is, probably 70, and, throw that terminology around.
Right, like if you're not comfortable saying it in front of them, you probably shouldn't be saying it.
Right. And to do it with a woman, she's not a big woman, and he feels, whatever, entitled to do this, while he's living in a country with a dictator, Viktor Orban, who has completely destroyed Hungary. And again, let's reflect on Hungary's GDP of $120 billion, with a B, dollars a year. That's like a quarterly earnings report for Walmart. That's not a GDP.
That's a lot of companies make more than that.
120 billion? I mean, think about that as far as like market cap for Apple, which is 2.9 trillion for a single American company. Google, 3.1 trillion.
Apple could buy Hungary and not break a sweat.
And never break stride. Never break stride. They blew $20 billion on Apple TV just to see if it would work.
And by God, it did.
I mean, to some extent, yeah. I mean, it's not holding up as a standalone product the way they had hoped. But they do have some
real good shows on there.
But, and every show glistens. You can see the money on, the money feels like you could touch it coming off the screen. Everything is so well produced. It's shot on the best possible the best of everything. I think Jennifer Aniston right now probably has the best job in show business with TMS, the morning show, and Reese Witherspoon, because they're working on a show where they get to work on these incredible sets in Midtown Manhattan. They're getting paid ridiculous salaries by a company that has an endless amount of money in Apple. And we're kind of getting into business a little bit here, veering into business and away from politics. But everything Apple produces, even Ted Lasso, dripped. You could feel the money.
For those of you that have not seen it, it is a phenomenal show.
The best, I guess you call it sitcom comedy, television show I have seen. I don't know if I've ever seen anything. I don't know if I've ever seen anything to compare it to. But back to the point for a moment, just speaking of money, the money seems to be oozing out of your 4K TV. Everybody's got a 4K, 8,000 frame per second, 60-inch big screen nowadays, because we don't go to the movie theaters and stuff as much. And the money just oozes off the screen. Everybody has got a Gucci bag. Everybody has name the bags. I mean
the cars we saw in Ted
cars,
Lasso alone.
The Bentleys, the Lambos. I mean, Ted Lasso even had that. Every time they showed the woman who owned the team, she was in another, white Rolls Royce Phantom or white Bentley Continental or whatever. But it's everything. It feels like it's an advertisement for a luxury brand, but it's not. It's a hard-hitting, heartfelt television show. And the same way the morning show is a hard-hitting, gritty, R-rated, definitely R-rated if you have children, drama series. But again, you can feel the money oozing off the screen. Apple's not afraid about spending $20 billion, to prop up their studio.
So we have established, yes, they could buy Hungary and not break stride.
Yeah.
I know right now we as Democrats are getting a lot of flack from the other side that we're just riding a sugar high with Kamala Harris. I mean, we've talked about it that we really don't think it's a sugar high to begin with. Mm-hmm. But does it really matter even if it is? I mean, we're so close to the election.
Here's the thing. So, I believe Trump was shot on June 27th. No, was it June 27th?
Quote unquote shot.
Or was it after that? Anyway, so we have the the Republican convention, which is supposed to create a bump in the polls for the Republican candidate.
And it did not.
It did. For a moment. Just bear with me. Then Trump is hit with a piece of debris from a gunshot, an assassination attempt. No question it was an assassination attempt. Major questions as to whether or not a bullet got that close to his ear. And if his ear got cut, why did it bleed so profusely? Blood thinners and a stroke. Those are the two things that I could put out there as with no medical expertise whatsoever. But why else would an ear bleed like that? All of us know people who have earrings, and when they went to get their earrings, it's not like their face was splattered with blood. That's essentially what happened to Trump. So he got hit with a piece of plastic or glass or something else in this assassination attempt. Now, take that scenario with any other presidential candidate or any other president, and their numbers go through the roof. Within a couple of days, Biden announces he's stepping down. He has a few choice words for the elite class of Democratic donors, talking about the whales here, who had essentially cut off oxygen to his campaign and said, no, we're not throwing any more money at you, Joe. We just don't think you can win. You can certainly lead. You just can't campaign anymore the way you could 4, 8, 12, 16 years ago. And then Kamala steps in. And suddenly, all of that part of the Democratic base that had been fading, young voters, voters of color, when we were down 20, 30 points among some of these groups from where we had been in 2020. And Kamala Harris comes along, and suddenly she doesn't have that tick in her voice anymore, that sort of nervous, I'm number two sort of, I don't know. Whatever it was that made Kamala Harris seem like a less popular candidate than, let's say, a Gretchen Whitmer or a Gavin Newsom disappeared.
Oh, it's long gone now.
It disappeared. I mean, if we ran a Democratic primary today, and I got all of my choices, I got Shapiro, I got Newsom, I got Whitmer, I got Andy Beshear from Kentucky right next door, or Roy Cooper right next door in North Carolina, I'm still going to vote for Kamala Harris after seeing her perform the last couple of weeks. The way she's using the
Zoom.
The way she's using Zoom. Brilliant.
And
white dudes.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention. She's using modern language. Mm-hmm. She's not saying, oh, this is for white men. It's for you white dudes. Like, that caters to kind of that younger generation, and that she's more kind of in touch.
She's also embracing, Sean Hannity and these other right-wing lunatics, Jesse Waters, a career harasser of women, on Bill O'Reilly's behalf until O'Reilly was canned and they had to stick somebody in his place. Waters had been hanging around Fox for a decade or so they stuck him in there. They ridicule Democrats for what they call identity politics. It's deeper than that. We're the party who at the time, the president, Lyndon B. Johnson, was going against his own state and his own sect within the Democratic Party, Dixiecrats, by signing the Civil Rights and then the Voting Rights Act, 64 and 65, increasing access to the polls for African Americans. It's the Democrats have done all of the hard work for Native Americans. Not all, don't get me wrong. You go back far enough, and Lincoln was a radical Republican and had a radical Republican majority in the House and Senate during the Civil War. Radical Republicans once upon a time. But they very quickly became the Grand Old Party, the GOP, which catered to the ultra wealthy, the robber barons of the 1880s and 1890s, Cornelius Vanderbilt, J.P. Morgan, Thomas Edison's. And the Democratic Party came along as the party of white labor. And in the 1960s, liberal Democrats, some of them bordering on socialist, from the Northeast, the Kennedys in particular, turned the Democratic Party like a cruise ship, very slowly, to the left and said, no, we're not just going to be labor. It's going to be black labor. It's going to be Hispanic labor. It's going to be women in the workforce. It's going to be the right for women to have credit cards, which, by the way, a woman in this country of any race had to have the signature of her husband or her father to get a credit card until 1972. That's not that long ago. It's not that long ago. If you're 30...
That was still in some people's lifetimes.
Absolutely. If you're 30, that means your mother was alive during that time period, more than likely. I'm 40. I have very young biological parents. And my mother was a teenager in 72, when this was going on.
Yeah, my mom was a young child. She was there too.
So, if you're a minimum of 30 and you didn't have, and your mother didn't get pregnant at 13, odds are you were raised by someone who lived through this. Anybody who's over the age of 60, has lived through a period of time when women literally had no rights. You had no right to your own body. Roe v. Wade hadn't been established as law of the land, so there was no right to anything. There was no credit cards. There was no nothing.
It's things like that make me really question how women can be on conservative, especially MAGA Republicans. How can you do that? It's older women especially. If you had lived through this, you know what it was like. How are you okay with this for your children and grandchildren?
Culture wars, Newt Gingrich in particular, beginning really the thinking around this began in the 70s as labor unions, as corporations tried to claw back some of the things they had given to workers, to labor unions. They tried to claw back some of the rights that had been granted to minorities and to women. They tried to deliberalize the country after 40 or 50 years of consistent liberal policy, starting with the early FDR administration in 33, immediately getting welfare out to people who were starving to death because we had 30% unemployment in the United States. Under Joe Biden, by the way, Trump did make the false statement again that the lowest black unemployment in history was under his administration. Wrong. The lowest black unemployment in American history is right now. And the President of the United States right now is Joe Biden. 4.8%. That's the black unemployment today. 4.8%. When overall unemployment is 3.9. So that's as close to some level of equality as we've ever seen, whether it was the Obama administration, who of course Obama was dealing with a near Great Depression and the recession left behind by America's first truly illegitimate president, and George W. Bush. And you'll never change my mind on that. People say you shouldn't say that. Bush was a respectable man. Maybe. But what happened in Florida in 2000 was not respectable. He won 2004 fair and square, as far as we know. But, anyone who doesn't know Professor Alan Lichtman of American University, They call him the predictor because he's predicted 9 of the last 10 presidential elections accurately, with the exception of 2000. And he was actually right about 2000. But the Republican Party of Florida, which, by the way, the candidate running, his brother was the governor of that state, therefore ran the infrastructure, including the voting infrastructure, and then a Republican Supreme Court appointed George W. Bush president of the United States.
My last question about kind of Kamala Harris is, and I think in the next week we'll probably see a VP pick. I think
by Monday.
Who do you think is going to probably be the strongest for her to kind of run with her? I know we agreed that Buttigieg was not probably the greatest one right now, and I think you and I came down to either Shapiro or Kelly.
Yeah. Also, I forgot about this. Captain Kelly, Senator Kelly. I shouldn't joke calling him Captain Kelly. I just always liked the way that sounded. Has an identical twin brother. Oh. So we could have 2 vice presidents.
We can just switch them out when we.
Yeah, if there's a real threat on the country, we could, call his brother, and say, we need you to fill in for the vice president. Could you do it? And then if there's an assassination attempt, that's terrible. I'm joking. If Captain Kelly, Senator Kelly, University of Tennessee at Knoxville graduate, we'll throw that out there one more time. Go Vols, VFL for life. If he is the candidate, he brings so much strength to the ticket. He also balances out the time JD, I am strange, Vance, and I won't even stand up for my wife when people talk about her not being white and being of another race. So you wouldn't even say, my wife is a Hindu and she's a proud Hindu, and our Christian wedding was blessed in the ceremony, by a Hindu priest or whatever. I no disrespect to the Hindus and Hindis. I don't really understand. I don't know the system. I don't want my ignorance of Hinduism to make our podcast sound like, we just don't care. I'm trying my best to be respectful. I found it disgusting that he wouldn't immediately snap back and say, that's my wife. That's the mother of my children. She's a brilliant woman. We met at Yale Law School. What does your wife do? That would have been my in-your-face response to the mother of my children. And J.D. Vance sort of apologized for her being brown.
Well, we know J.D. Vance sucks, so are we thinking that Kelly's probably going to be the strongest running mate for her?
Maybe. Shapiro's certainly the sharpest, I think, and that's no knock against Kelly. But Shapiro's younger, he's sharp, and it's more important to win Pennsylvania than it is Arizona. I mean, we need to establish Pennsylvania as a blue state again. In the days when there was no question. I mean, Pennsylvania until 2016 was as blue as New York State. So, or not quite, but it was it wasn't the same close margin, but it was safe. That was safe territory. It's the Northeast, no chance anything's going wrong here. And then something went wrong. So, Pennsylvania is so important. It seems to me that Captain Kelly is open to it, that Mark Kelly's open to it, Senator Kelly. He is such a likable guy, and again, commands so much respect. I mean, this is, a man who set the record for the most time spent in space. He was a fighter pilot in the United States Navy. I mean, he reached captain status. I mean, he's done. His wife was Gabby Gifford, who was shot in the head when she was in the United States Congress in 2012 at a mall in Aurora, Colorado, in the head, and recovered from it. and is now he nursed her back, helped nurse her back to health. I'm sure with plenty of help. He helped nurse her back to health, and then stepped in and said, "Okay, my wife can't do it anymore, so I'm going to help lead this charge." Ran for Senate and won, and flipped Arizona blue. And Arizona is now on a blue trajectory that seems inevitable. That it's going to be as blue as New Mexico, which is a very liberal state just to its east, and almost as blue as California, which is obviously the state directly to its west. So I wouldn't be disappointed by either.
Yeah, I think either one of them would be strong candidates. I guess we'll just see come Monday who they...
If you want me to guess, you want me to really guess right now and give you my best educated guess right at this moment. Captain Kelly.
Okay, I'm still on the Shapiro side. I think he might pull out.
And that's fair.
But again, both of them are very strong candidates, and I think they're going to balance her out very well on the ticket. They're definitely going to be able to pull way ahead of J.D. Vance and
his dumpster fire. Let's be honest here. The best candidate isn't being considered because of his sexuality.
Right.
The best politician who is still eligible to serve, because Barack Obama is our best politician, but his days are over. Okay, he's not. He's done politicking. He's an advisory role now for the next 30 years. He's only in his 60s, early 60s, 61 or 62, something like that. He's always going to be sort of the godfather of the Democratic Party. Outside of him, and maybe even better than Barack Obama, is Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg goes on Fox News and gets standing ovations in front of live crowds.
I would love to see him
Pete Buttigieg tears Republicans limb from limb because he's from Indiana. He went to Harvard. He served in the Marine Corps. I mean, he's brilliant. It's clear the moment he opens his mouth, he's brilliant. So it's like the opposite of me. When you turn on the Magnolia Media podcast, you go, hey, maybe this will be entertaining because this guy's an ass. Pete Buttigieg is exactly the opposite. I can't wait to hear the next thing he has to say because he's got me excited about the future. He's got me excited. And, not only that, but as an open-minded liberal or progressive person, I look at Pete Buttigieg, who's out there working hard. His husband is a school teacher. They have twin boys. What a beautiful family. Families come in all shapes, sizes, colors, genders, whatever. And Chasten and he, it's like a Norman Rockwell painting if homosexuality had been as openly embraced and accepted in mainstream society back then as it is today. That's a lovely family, a wonderful, seemingly wonderful guy, an incredibly effective transportation secretary. He should stay on as transportation secretary. And I think that in 2030, because now we're talking about 2028, so 2032, he still won't be 50 years old, by the way, in 2032. Pete Buttigieg, probably with a heterosexual male running mate, African-American male running mate, something like that, will be the presidential nominee. He's too good to waste. This is a generational talent. I mean, think about the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse. It was supposed to take, 18 months to get that up and going again. They had the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which we all saw the video. It completely collapsed. This massive bridge over one of the most important ports in America collapsed. And days, not months and months and months, or 3 or 4 or 5 years later, days later, the debris had been cleared out of the way and that port was open. Who's responsible for that? Well, the Director of Transportation, the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. Then we have the I-95 bridge collapse when a tanker full of gasoline explodes. It's so hot that it twists the steel beams in the overpass above it, closes down America's most important interstate, I-95, which runs from Miami to Maine. So right through all of your East Coast cities, from, again, Miami, Charleston, Jacksonville, Charleston, on up, Philadelphia, Providence, New York City, Boston. And it's fixed in like 11 days. Days? Not months or years? Like, when did the government get so efficient? Oh,
that is a pretty big feat.
The Director of Transportation, the Secretary of Transportation, I apologize for his title.
Now I got one last question for you. So we know that Trump has a lot on the line, and between the documents case and the January 6th trials and everything else he's got going for him, hopefully when he loses the election, what do you think's next in store for him? Just prison time?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be...
Does he have any basis to try to drag this out anymore? I mean, this really seems like this is his last effort to avoid anything. Like, I don't see what else he has to... He has no cards left.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take some sort of effort by the Supreme Court, and things are so bad that rumors are, and again, this is rumor, I'm not trying to go down some conspiratorial rabbit hole, that Clarence Thomas, because of all of his issues, to avoid his wife being prosecuted for her role in January 6th and his role in basically selling out to Harlan Crow, John Roberts losing control of the court and becoming... the Roberts court will be looked back on as the court that broke the Supreme Court, where no longer can we really respect rulings from the Supreme Court because they ignore the Constitution, they ignore legality and illegality, and they just run roughshod over everybody, do what they want. So there are murmurs, whispers that Alito might step down, no matter what happens. Samuel Alito.
We can only know.
Martha Ann, the appeal to heaven flag, the distress flag. I mean, first of all, he is a shame, and he should step down. It just never crossed my mind that he might actually do it. Clarence Thomas, who, I mean, there's so many nasty things I could say about Clarence Thomas that with a couple of drinks in me, I probably would say. Person to person, not on the podcast, obviously. A truly evil man is all I can say about Clarence Thomas. Is also considering stepping down. And John Roberts is thinking about giving up the position of Chief Justice. So we're talking about an entirely new court. That would make it a 6-3 liberal supermajority.
Plus a liberal president.
If we can just hold on to either Tester's seat in Montana or pick up a Senate seat in Texas or Florida, which we can do. We might not win the state, but we can, we're depending on a split ticket to win Ohio as it is. We could, if we don't win it in her first 2 years, the second half of her first term, she'll have control of all 3 branches of government. So if not the first time, the second time, because this country is becoming more and more liberal.
Imagine how much shit will get done.
Yeah, it's amazing. First of all, Roe v. Wade would be law of the land, but we're not going to leave that to the courts anymore. We're going to get that in writing from Congress and pass, substantive female, something like the Female Bodily Autonomy Act, something that protects the shipping of methylprexone and other abortion drugs across state lines that make sure women can get all of the natal care they need without any interference from the federal government, basically saying hands off. It'll reinstate the right of the individual, which has been common law in the United States, and say the institution, like a church, does not, and a person's affiliation with a church, does not trump another person's individual right to whatever it might be, whether it be a gay couple wanting a cake made for their wedding and someone saying, no, I'm affiliated with a church and these are my beliefs, so it's you're trampling on my rights. That's nonsense. It's nonsense. First of all, you're just a homophobe. That's all there is to it. Come out and say it. My religion preaches hate.
Hey, I'm going to circle you back around there real quick. Trump, what do we think anything other than prison times for him?
Okay,
do you think he has any cards left to play after this election?
First of all, the Florida documents case will have to start back from scratch. They'll have to go in front of, it'll be a new prosecutor. And this time, instead of fooling with Jack Smith, either make Jack Smith a member of the Department of Justice or Attorney General, and let him deal with Trump and get the Florida case started again with a new prosecutor, a new judge. Trump will be running from that. My thought is Trump will flee. Trump will abandon his family.
Flee the country?
Yeah, he has to. He has no choice. He's not going to die in prison. He's too much of a narcissist for that. The issue is he's of no use to Putin.
He's of no use to anybody.
We have extradition treaties with everyone in Europe. So none of those properties will be safe for you. You can't go hide at your Irish golf course or your Scottish golf course because we'll just come bring you back, kicking and screaming.
I think he's really only got, some third world countries that
he
could maybe try to
go to Nicaragua,
and let's
Venezuela.
Imagine Trump being in those countries.
Yeah, that's going to be tough. Bring bug spray. Is all I can tell you. Lay off the spray tan and bring bug spray instead, because you're going to need.
Maybe he could mix them.
Yeah, and mix them together and drink them. Anyway, Rust-Oleum number 45
with citronella.
With some citronella in it. Anyway, no, obviously the January 6th case is going to pick back up. The absolute presidential immunity, that was a myth. That was never what the Supreme Court said. They have even considering the Supreme Court ruling, they still have a 3 massive charges against Trump that will stick even with this current Supreme Court and in D.C. That's ready to go as soon as we figure out a schedule. Then there'll be the rescheduling through the 11th district in Atlanta. We'll reschedule grand jury testimony in Miami. That case will be moved back to Dade County, the documents case. That, to me, is more important even than the Jan 6 case. The idiots who attacked the Capitol on January 6 are systematically being held responsible. There's a tip line. If you know somebody who attacked the Capitol and brags about it, whose face has been seen, but we don't really know who they are, they don't have a big online presence, you can contact the FBI. They'll be picked up for questioning within 24 hours. So there is a way, in case you're Southern, you're listening to this, you know somebody who's bragged about being there, then they need to be held responsible. Everybody's basically getting 7 years, except for the worst of the worst. Let them go do their 7 years, because that's what they deserve. So even more than that, the documents case put lives at risk. CIA agents, people who keep us safe, people who make it so that we can sleep at night without worrying about a bomb from Iran or a bomb coming from North Korea or a bomb coming from Russia. Those people died because of what Donald Trump did. Now, we will never know those direct links because we don't have that security clearance unless one of us runs for Congress. Maybe Courtney, Miss Brown, will run for Congress.
Even if I did, then I wouldn't be able to tell you about him.
No, you wouldn't be able to tell us about it, but at least you'd know. And again, you'd have to be in the Gang of Eight to know that, and that's an exclusive club. So you'd have to be reelected to the House 12 to 15 times. That's the 2-year term in the House, and at some point you'd think you'd move on to senator, and that would give you an opportunity at being in the Gang of Eight, and then that gets you access to the super secure location somewhere at the bottom of the U.S. Senate, where the Gang of Eight is allowed to see SIPA, Classified Information Protection Act information, where it can be discussed with you with CIA clandestine officials who are not shown on television. That's there are 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans. So if you make it to that level, don't forget about old John and Magnolia Media. If you make it to Gang of Eight level. Now, you want to talk about cloaks and daggers. Those are the people who decide who's going to play cloaks and daggers. They're not playing at any games. They're the ones who decide, who's going to be involved in this season of House of Cards.
Global chess.
Yeah, they're the ones who build the House of Cards. They're not the ones who deal with the House of Cards, the structure itself. They're beyond that. Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi on the Democratic side, Speaker Jeffries, maybe Dick Durbin, Democratic Senate Judiciary Committee leader, and then on the Republican side, Mitt Romney, a respectable, high level, again, Mitch McConnell. We're talking about the biggest dogs at the dog park, who just sit in the shade and watch the other ones play. And that's really where you have to be to see this information. But anyway, I think that information, those 200 or so boxes, he obviously obstructed justice. He obviously sent those men out to do it, Walt Nauta and the Luis de Oliveira. Again, I'm not an attorney. I'll refer you to the Midas Touch podcast. Legal AF is a podcast done under the Midas Touch umbrella with Michael Popak and Karen Friedman Agnifilo. We're going to put a little plug in for their podcast because they do a wonderful job of breaking these things down to the atomic level when it comes to the intersection of law and politics and the trouble Trump will see if he's not elected president. And, we're doing everything we can as a little organization. The country is, teetering on an edge, and it seems like we're coming together. About 55% of the country seems to be coming together. It looks like she's going to win all 7 battleground states and a surprise state somewhere. If I had to guess, North Carolina will be the surprise, but I think she may even pull a Senate seat from somewhere. We're not looking at the current moment. Could be. I don't know. I haven't looked at the map. I don't have it in front of me. I don't have my computer in front of me right now. But she could. Who knows? Who knows? Because Kamala has changed the game, and Trump has become the old, senile, crazy, weird, with the uncomfortably gay J.D. Vance, running with him.
Funny how those tables turned.
I mean, just like that, right? It was Trump, and now it's, oh, no, Trump, sorry.
Suddenly age doesn't seem to be an issue for the Republicans anymore.
He called himself that it's a race between a young woman and a fine young man. You're 78 and you openly wear diapers, Donald. So,
young is much past. Young should not be in your vocabulary anymore.
No, I mean, she's 59.
And she is gorgeous for 59.
She's beautiful.
Let's throw that out there.
She's beautiful. And that's another thing. Scott Galloway brings this point up. I love Scott Galloway. If you don't know who he is, Google him. I'm not going into that. Don't have time for it. And he talks about the race problem in America is going to solve itself because of all of the multiracial people and the next generation and the generations to come. No one's going to know exactly what race you are. Why guess? And these people who are Latinos, Latinas, black, and European white and American Indian. They're gorgeous. We're talking about skin tones that, have never been seen, and eye color and hair and skin combinations. This is a gorgeous, young crop of Americans coming up, and America is the only place in the world where that's possible. It's not possible. It has never been possible anywhere else. If you're from France, you're French. If you're from Britain, you're British. If you're from Spain, you're a Spaniard. If you're from America, you're from everywhere, all at once, working together to form a more perfect union.
Well, that's about it for us today. We got off on a few tangents, but I think we had a good interview.
Yeah.
Anything else you got for me? You want to throw at? Anything you want to throw out again?
No, I think we're probably running short on time. I know you've still got some things scheduled this evening, but it was fun coming on and being interviewed instead of either being the interviewer or doing a commentary.
Awesome. Well, as usual, if you like our podcast and want to see more of us, please like, share, and subscribe. We have our Patreon at Magnolia Media 2024.
Patreon.com/Magnolia Media Network. Also, follow my Instagram account, which is all about the Magnolia Media Podcast, at Magnolia John 2024 on Instagram and Threads. On Twitter X, where I rarely on that cesspool. But if you look for me there, it's Magnolia John 2 on Twitter X. Otherwise, feel free to drop us a line on our email at
magnoliamedia2024@gmail.com.
magnoliamedia2024 at
gmail.com. Reach out to us, questions, comments, anything. We want to hear from you guys. We want to keep this going. So that wraps it up for me. Good for you?
Yeah, that does it.
All right, then from everybody here at the Magnolia Media Podcast, be well.